Hey everyone. In our exploration of policy so far, we focused predominantly on the US and been looking at domestic policy. But there are many social ecological issues that cross boundaries. Climate change is a prominent example. And so there's a clear need for international coordination on these sorts of issues, but undertaking this is challenging because international policy is very messy and complicated. I want to explore that a bit in this video. I have some slides to share. Here we go. The first reason I would point to is there is a lack of a cohesive international governing body that can set policy, compel behavior of nation states through those policies, and then hold them to account with regulatory teeth if they fail to comply with the policy. So we have a reliance on negotiated treaties, conventions, agreements among nations with varying interests. These could be bilateral, multilateral agreements, but these kinds of agreements are difficult to come to as well. Difficult to come to agreements and harder still to come to agreements that have any legally binding consequences and hard to enforce those. This is because of a few reasons as well. First is considerations of national sovereignty. So nations don't want to compromise their own national sovereignty by signing on to an agreement that has legally binding consequences if they don't live up to it. And there's nothing to compel them to sign on to that agreement. So often they prefer not to. We have varying interests, country by country, region by region, and vast power discrepancies between those countries. So it's hard to work out the distribution of benefits and costs of taking action in any agreement, especially as there are varying degrees of impact and culpability involved in an issue. So if we take climate change as an example, we can think about who are the nations responsible for causing climate change, who are the major greenhouse gas emitters, and then we can think about what are the countries, who are the countries that are most impacted by climate change and going to be most impacted by climate change. Within that, we can be thinking about who should be prioritized for support and who should be paying for that support or making the sacrifices involved. And so much to negotiate. We look at the power inequities of the countries involved. And without any strong international governing body or nothing to compel or force action, countries are free to decline to participate, free to walk away from or fail to honor their agreements. And in some cases, if we're thinking about certain policies, one country might have veto power, singular veto power, to prevent an agreement. So again, we see this playing out in the context of climate change as efforts at coming up with these international agreements have failed to set ambitious enough targets, and they've failed to create legally binding frameworks with regulatory punishments that hold countries accountable for meeting those targets. Recently in the news, we see that Trump is pulling the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement. So all of these challenges facing international policy are really front and center highlighted right there. So we have no overarching governance structure, but there are some groups working at an international scale trying to promote coordination. And I want to talk through a few of those here. At the outset, I'll note that these organizations largely reflect existing power structures and privilege certain interests. So that is something to keep an eye on as we go through them. The first group I'd mention is the United Nations. They were founded in 1945 in the wake of World War II. Their explicit focus is on maintaining peace, international security, and respect for human rights. There's 193 member states, but there's 5 permanent members of the Security Council that have veto power. So that's the US, UK, France, Russia, and China. So we can see a disproportionate influence by certain countries in United Nations decision making. The next group I'd highlight is the World Health Organization, founded in 1948. It's part of the UN system focused on promoting public health, reducing communicable diseases. So they're engaged in disease prevention, monitoring, reporting, emergency response, and health policy. There's 194 member states. And I'll note that Trump is pulling the US out of the World Health Organization as we speak. The next organization I'll mention is the World Bank, founded in 1944. It's also part of the UN system. It's focused on poverty reduction through foreign capital investment and the promotion of international trade. It provides loans to middle and lower income countries in support of that agenda of promoting international trade. There's 188 member states, and they award disproportional voting power that favors the interests of industrialized nations in their decision making. Another group I'd highlight is the International Monetary Fund, founded in 1945, also part of the UN system. They're focused on promoting economic stability and growth and poverty reduction through increased cooperation and trade. They pool member funds and then award loans to countries in financial turmoil, financial crisis. I'll note that those loans are awarded with certain strings attached, which typically involve the opening up of markets, privatizing of industries, and often cutting spending for social and environmental causes to prioritize economic interests. And so these are the stipulations in terms of often receiving funding. There's 188 member states in the IMF. And then we have the World Trade Organization. This is outside of the UN, founded in 1995. Just checking my notes here. They are focused on facilitating cross-border trade. So they work with nation states to develop trade agreements and then resolve disputes between those countries based on the agreements. There's 162 member states. There's also the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. This was founded in 1948 as OEEC. There are 37 member countries. They are generally Western higher income countries that are members of OECD. And they are working to inform an evidence-based global standards and share policy recommendations. So they're conducting research, issuing reports and guidelines for economic development and economic considerations. The last one I'll mention is USAID. This is an independent agency of the US government. They're working in over 100 countries, promoting global health, economic development, and advancing democracy. From their website, it says that USAID's work advances US national security and economic prosperity. But this has been in the news quite a bit as the Trump administration is seeking to shut down USAID's operations. So we'll see where that lands. A lot of turmoil in this international governance space as the Trump administration seeks to pull back from their international participation, international agreements, international involvement. And we could debate the merits and concerns over such an approach, certainly, and we'll attend to this as we come together for discussion. I'm going to pause my slides here. I'll note that I have some qualms with this overarching global development agenda and orientation. At the same time, I don't think we can escape the need for international coordination. As an example, Trump pulling out of the World Health Organization has real impacts in terms of global ability to respond to emerging health threats and the US's ability to respond to those as well. So while we hold this tension, we're going to turn our focus to globalization and bring in economic considerations explicitly for the second half of our prep this week. And as we engage in that and think about these organizations, how they may be promoting or supporting certain pathways and outcomes, and how the most powerful members of these organizations, of these groups, may be able to shape their agendas and actions of those groups in their interest. So let's keep an eye on that as we work through the second half of the prep. Thanks so much.